chicos, hola chicas. Well, welcome to this explanation of this frame about the imperfect tense. Basically, when you talk about something that you've done in the past, okay, long time ago sometimes, okay, or last summer, or last year, or when you were little, okay. In English, you probably translate that as I used to do something. Here, as you can see in this frame, we got the beginning, probably the most important part of the frame, which is the verb. And in Spanish, we go basically three ways to say I used to in Spanish. Okay, I used to, in Spanish, I used to run, I used to eat, I used to travel, and so on. It's probably the easiest ways to talk about what you used to do in Spanish. And you are going to use solía. Solía means I used to in Spanish, and then you put a verb ending in R. Any verb. It could be ER, IR, or AR. Solía escuchar, I used to listen. Solía comer, I used to eat. Solía vivir, I used to live. Okay? As you can see, AR, ER, or IR, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is the ending is an R. That's the reason why I put an R in there. Okay? If you want to talk about group of people, you can add mos to solía. Solíamos. We used to. So if you feel confident using solía plus any verb ending in R, you can add mos to solía. Solíamos escuchar. We used to listen. Okay? Now, this is the easiest way because you don't have to change anything. You basically need to use solía and then the verb ending AR verbs, and basically that is around 80% of the verbs. Most of the verbs in Spanish ends in AR. What you have to do is that R in there, you remove it and you put BA from British Airways. Remember the mental hook. So instead of escuchar, you remove the R and you say escuchaba. And that means I used to listen as well. And again, if you want to talk about group of people, you just need to add mos to escuchaba, mos. So escuchaba is I used to listen. Escuchábamos, we used to listen. That is for AR verbs. And for ER and IR verbs, which is basically the rest of the 20% left of verbs, we put IA instead of ER or IR. So in here, we have to remove the ER on the IR. So comía, I used to eat. Vivía, I used to live. From comer and from vivir. Okay? So that is the third way to talk about what you used to do in Spanish. And again, if you want to talk about a group of people, you just need to add mos. So comíamos, we used to eat. Vivíamos, we used to live. So these are the three ways to say I used to in Spanish. And then that's really, really important is the past expression that goes with these verbs. Normally you will say you used to do something when you were little, cuando era pequeño, o cuando era pequeña, when I was little, okay? If you're a girl, pequeña. And also, if you talk about a group of people, like we can add mos to era, cuando éramos pequeños. Cuando éramos pequeñas. Another expression that you can use is hace and then años o meses. For example, hace 2 años, hace 2 meses, hace 3 años, hace 3 meses. Literally 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So you can say as well hace tiempo, like a while ago, or you can say as well hace mucho tiempo, long time ago, a while ago. Okay? Another expression that you can use is really useful is cuando tenía, and then you put the number, your age basically. Cuando tenía 12 años, for example. Cuando tenía 12 años. Literally, when I had 12 years old. But in English, you will say when I was 12 years old, okay? So, cuando tenía 12 años. Cuando tenía 20 años. And you choose the number in there, okay? And the last one, for example, was fines de semana. At weekends, I used to do something in the past. So these 5 expressions goes with these 3 ways to use I used to in Spanish, okay? Now, let's try to see this in a real writing bullet point for you and from your past paper, and then we can see how can we use this in a real exam. Let's do it. Right. Okay, guys. Guys, so in here we got a typical question where you can use this imperfect tense. ¿Qué hacías en el pasado para estar en forma? What do you used to do in the past to be fit or to be in shape or to stay in shape? Okay, so it's something that you can actually use this imperfect tense, but obviously the first thing we have to do is we need the writing frame so we can have a look and we can start using all these amazing verbs. But with this writing frame, we can start using the verbs, but also before we start, it's really important that we can rephrase some bits of this bullet point. So we can actually use this in your answer. For example, en el pasado, you can use en el pasado in your answer, but also para estar en forma. You can use that particular expression in your answer. So that's what we're going to do now. As you can see in here, we got en el pasado para estar en forma. We basically use that from the bullet point. Now, before you start, you need to start writing, you need to think in the verbs, in the action words that you need to use, okay? So, because you're talking about stay fit and stay on shape, you need to think in activities to help you to be healthy. So as you can see in here, we got 3 verbs that we are going to use. Comer sano, to eat healthy, montar en bici, to ride your bike, and practicar deportes, to practice sports. As you can see, all the verbs ends in R. Some of them in ER and some of them in AR. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the first way to talk about I used to, where you don't need to change anything. And you're going to see how easy it is to use the imperfect tense properly. So let's do it with solía and then some of these verbs. So in here we call solía, which means I used to, and then we're going to use the first one, comer sano, the first verb. I used to eat healthy, okay? And you can say, for example, okay? Por ejemplo, and then you can put what you used to eat healthy. Por ejemplo, solía comer fruta y verduras. Okay? So that's really a good example of how to use solía and then any verb. And remember, the verb, as you can see, ends in R. Instead of comer sano, you can write down solía montar en bici. You can say maybe especially on weekends or at the weekend. Especialmente los fines de semana. If you want to get more marks, even more marks, you can use, for example, the BA at the end of the AR verbs. So, for example, practicar deportes ends in AR. As you can see, AR. So what you have to do to say I used to practice, you can put, instead of R, you can put BA of previous airways, practicaba. And that means I used to practice. That's the second way with AR verbs. So, practicaba deportes cuando era pequeño. Cuando era pequeño. Remember, you can use one of these expressions to go with the imperfect tense. Cuando era pequeño, when I was younger. Okay? And you can say as well, why? Porque me gusta. Okay? Now, when you express your opinion, talking about something that you used to do, what you need to do is add BA to the opinion. That means because I used to like it. Okay? So again, don't use me gusta, just add BA, and still you can use comer sano. Remember, comer sano ends in ER, should be in this category. Okay? So you can say, remember, comer, that ER, you remove it, and you put IA, comía. Remember, don't put comer, put comía. So, comía sano, por ejemplo, comía verdura y fruta. Okay, just the last one, the last tip. Feel free to use one of these expressions, even if they are not in the bullet point. For example, you can say, when I was 15 years old, when I was 10 years old, I used to ride my bike a lot. Okay? So please feel free to show off your knowledge of Spanish. Cuando tenía 12 años, and then you can use, for example, solía. Solía montar en bici. Cuando tenía 12 años, solía montar en bici porque me encanta. But remember, what you need to add, me encantaba, okay? Because I used to love it, okay? Thank you, guys. I hope that you find this frame useful and you can start using it in your writing and your speaking when talking about something that you used to do in the past. Adiós.